Alright, today we're having a look at a platformer where you can't jump by Lothaire Limon. Alright, so here we are on a platformer where you can't jump by Lothaire Limon, and sure enough, we can't jump. Can we talk about how I love having scoreboards right up close to where we start and not being able to access them? And I know that sounds snarky, but it's not. It's actually a technique that I love, and I kind of wish I saw more creators doing that. Now, this reminded me a lot of I believe it was called No Jumps Factory. It was by MindPlanet 84 on their previous account, I believe, because unfortunately I wanted to actually play that when I saw this, not for the show, but like so that I could compare the two. And it's not up on their planet, so I don't know if that level is inaccessible anymore. There was actually like 2 levels, and they were working on a 3rd one. And I looked at them years and years back, and I really enjoyed them. And I kind of like these techniques these levels where they kind of block you off from a simple gameplay technique and make you work around it. This one is, for the most part, I feel like it's doing well enough as far as giving you things to do and motion options, even though that we don't have that one available to us. If I remember MindPlanet's well enough, there was a lot more that was kind of forcing you to, it was causing you to do things that were jump-like instead of actually being able to jump. So this feels a little bit different, where you're not necessarily required to do jumping things all the time. I'm a little bit cheesed off. Okay, I'm a little bit cheesed off there. I wanted those bubbles first, yes, but I also did not want to get zappified by the electricity, so I should have been paying attention, because that was relatively clear. Now, I kind of wish that they had the timer here set up a little bit differently so that you could see the count up as well as the count down. It's a small point, but it would be a good idea to know when it's going to actually be throwing you into the electrified bits, not just how long they would be active. But, minor point for the most part. How do I feel about the aesthetic of this level? I mean, I've got a whole thing about cardboard, so I can't really complain about that. I don't know if it's working super well with the background of the level, but it is nice and bright, and I appreciate that. And we are already done with just under 3 minutes. We're going to go back to the hub. We're going to talk about it there, and see yas. And we're back, and a platformer where you can't jump by Lothaire Limon. And you know what? I really enjoyed it. I think it's a nice, solid, strong yellow square. It has a few points that we're going to be discussing, but overall and all in all, I had a lot of fun with it. And really, when it comes down to it, is with a lot of these levels, just, are they fun? You can get sometimes complex levels, really beautifully put together and presented levels, but the actual play experience of the level itself is not enjoyable. And to me, like, give it to me simple sometimes. Give me just a nice, easy to process level that I can just jump into and play, and I'll love it. And I really enjoyed this one. I don't want anybody to think that when I say a simple level that I'm being backhandedly complimentary, because that is not the case. What we've got in this level, as we saw in the video, we got to see the whole level in the video, is just a basic, straightforward platformer with this one little gimmick. This gimmick that dentists don't want you to know, which is that the X button does not work at all through the level. And we see that presented very early on in a technique that I really enjoy. You've got that scoreboard. It's right, front, and center. Well, it's actually, it's right, left, and to the left. It's to the left, but you can't access it because there's this little bit that you can't jump over, and so the entire level is kind of looping back around to where you can get to that. I love that technique. I seem to see it so seldom in levels, and I don't know why. It's just a neat little technique, and it gives players something clear that they can aim for. It's not something I think every level needs, but I think it definitely works here. Now, as for the level itself, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but it's kind of interesting that it seems first and foremost a platformer with a gimmick, and that might seem like a bit of a weird thing to say, but what I mean here is that for the large part, you don't really need to jump in this level the way that it's set up. You're not like dealing with a lot of landing precision points or anything like that. You've got long stretches of running, you got your inclines, you got some pushing and pulling and like simple physics mechanics that you're dealing with. So like jump itself doesn't really come into play all that often in the level, so you don't quite notice the gimmick. When it does come up, when there are places where you need to use bounce pads, for example, to get some verticality in the level, then it reminds you that it's there, but it's not something that I think that you're going to be like struggling with or grappling with throughout the level. It's not quite implemented in that way. Now, one thing I do want to point out, a bit of a negative point, talking about the bounce pads, and I mentioned this in the video, you've got a series of bounce pads that are on timers, and for a few of them, they will throw you into electrified bits that are going to end up killing you. And what we find in that section is that you can tell how long the timer is going to stay on, how long the bounce pads are going to be active, but you can't tell actually when they're going to be active. That's not what the timer is displaying, and I do find that to add like a little bit of extra clutter to the player, where it's not really necessary in the level, because it's actually fairly simple to set this up. I put together in a test bed, and what we've got basically is a timer that's feeding into a selector. The selector is going to be triggering, here we see a light, but it'll be triggering a bounce pad in the stage, but also is feeding into a timer that's visually present on the field. Now that timer is nothing but a visual indicator, it doesn't connect to anything else. The reset for that timer is from the turn-off section of the selector, so you'll be able to see the timer going up. It'll tell you, when it's full, that the bounce pads are going to be on, but then when it disappears, then the bounce pads are off, so you can kind of judge, like, how much time do I have before this becomes a danger? And I think that would have been a little bit better of a technique to use in that section. Another thing that kind of stood out to me, this is more in a visual presentation, while I did like and I did appreciate the simplicity of the level, you got a lot of cardboard going on there, and cardboard is one of my favorite things to work with. You've got some flair and accents with colors, but like not really too much, and I think that it's just enough to give the level a bit of visual impression. But the background of the level, that canyon's background, and it seems like it comes up with that particular background a lot. I don't entirely know why, but it has a very bright, oversaturated, and washed out look to it. Now that might be just to kind of convey the canyon's impression that it's really, really hot, but I find that just visually speaking, it's a little bit, honestly, it's a little bit ugly, and it makes the rest of the level, the rest of the colors in the level look a little bit washed out. I probably would have changed the fog color and turned down the brightness just a little bit if I had been making the level myself. It's not a big deal, and honestly, there's not really much of big deals to talk about with this level. It is what it is. I found it quite enjoyable. Now, I did mention in the video, in the playthrough video, No More Jumps by MindPlanet84 under their previous handle of Wheel Slide, and that, I think, it's interesting because it's a very different take on this same gimmick. Where I said before that a platformer where you can't jump feels very much like a platformer with a gimmick, and No More Jumps feels very much like a gimmick with a platformer, where everything is kind of built around that gimmick, and everything is about how do you achieve verticality without being able to do the jump. There's actually two of those levels, No More Jumps 1 and No More Jumps 2. I liked both of them, but I do have to say I enjoyed No More Jumps 1 a little bit more. I found No More Jumps 2 was reliant a little bit more on power-ups than I really ended up enjoying. I made the same mistake in my last recording. Oh my god! I thought No More Jumps 2 relied a little bit more on power-ups than I particularly enjoyed, and also there's a Donkey Kong section in it that was not intended, that I didn't find very enjoyable, because I thought the boost boots in that section were kind of awkward to play. But I enjoyed both of those levels, and by all means keep an eye on Mind Planet 84. They're a really, really good creator, and I'm expecting some good stuff from them in the future. Toes crossed, but we got to see on one of the streams a little bit of a sneak preview of some work that they're doing. But not to take away from Lothaire Limon, this level was really, really fun, and this level is relatively new. It was only done a couple of days back, so there's not really a lot of folks on the scoreboard. I'm pretty sure that you can beat me. I'm down in like the 20s, I think. Couldn't break the top 5 this go about, but maybe you will. I bet you will, because you folks are great. You're great. You're great players. Now, just as a bit of a heads up, I'm probably going to be doing a B-side episode. I think it's going to be going next week, talking about some things that are going on in Meat Space and how they may, hopefully not, but may be affecting the program in the future. But I don't want to get too deep into that here, because this is Lothaire's time to shine. Check out their level. It was really fun. I had a good time with it, and I hope you will as well. But that really does it for us here this go about. So from me, Disco, here in Tokyo, to all of you out there, wherever you may happen to be, thank you, arigato, sayonara, see you, and ciao.